Our story begins on Coruscant just hours after the Battle of Geonosis. Everyone returned here after the battle, including Padme Amidala and Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was still on his special assignment to protect Padme, and the mission was going to end, with Anakin bringing her back to Naboo very soon. And when the two of them were alone, they had the idea to just escalate everything and get married right away. Both of them understood that a life together would be hard, but they were committed. They wanted to get married, but Padme had to finish some reports in the Senate first, so Anakin was walking around the temple when he found himself heading to his room. But before getting to his own room, Anakin stopped outside of Obi Wan's door. He could hear an unfamiliar voice coming from the inside, the voice of a woman. Anakin couldn't help himself from eavesdropping, and after just a few minutes, the door slid open from a wave of the Force. Anakin stumbled inside, finding Obi Wan shaking his head, telling Anakin he can't exactly sneak up on him anymore. He would recognize his presence in the Force from just about anywhere. Anakin just smiled back, looking over to the holopuck that Obi Wan had placed on the desk in front of him. From the puck, there was a woman emerging, wearing royal Mandalorian clothing, and Obi Wan told Anakin that her name is Satine Kryze, and this is a recording that he kept from a mission many years ago. It was her final message to him, saying goodbye after they were forced to depart on unfortunate terms. Anakin could tell that something was truly bothering Obi Wan. He had to hold himself back from teasing his master about it. Instead, he just asked Obi Wan why he's remembering her today. Obi Wan admitted that he's not sure, but when he was in the Geonosis arena before Anakin arrived, he was fully convinced that he was about to die, and he wasn't exactly sure what he was dying for. Was it for the Jedi Order that's sending him out into a war that none of them truly understand? But he realized in that arena that he may have made the wrong choice long ago, and Obi-Wan would tell Anakin something that he's never revealed to anyone before. Back before the two of them even met, while Obi-Wan was on special assignment to protect Satine, he fell deeply in love with her. And Obi-Wan took a deep breath, as if trying to come to terms with all of this. He admitted to Anakin that, had Satine said the word, he would have left the Jedi Order for her, without another thought. Anakin's face went red. He was a bit embarrassed by the fact that he was about to get married and stay in the Jedi Order. Clearly, Obi-Wan didn't think that was an option. But Anakin would decide in this moment that there's nothing here to lose. He looked to Obi-Wan, telling him it's not too late. He should go to her, but he doesn't have to leave the Order. Anakin would tell Obi-Wan that he is the greatest Jedi he's ever met, and whether or not Obi-Wan cares to admit it, he hasn't exactly been great at avoiding attachment anyway. Obi-Wan had an attachment with Qui-Gon that went far beyond the typical Master-Padawan relationship. Qui-Gon was like a father for him, and with Anakin, well, they were like family, like brothers. Anakin told Obi-Wan that attachment could certainly be dangerous for some Jedi, but Obi-Wan isn't one of them. He should do what makes him happy. After all, they're about to be war generals. They could both die on the battlefront in the coming days. May as well enjoy the final days if it's true. Obi-Wan thought about it for a bit. Then he looked up at Anakin, asking him why he's suddenly so experienced in these thoughts. And with a small laugh, Anakin admitted in this moment of vulnerability that he and Padme have found a real spark, and they're getting married on Naboo tonight. Obi-Wan put his head into his hands, groaning about how the Council is going to kill them. Anakin just told Obi-Wan that this quick ceremony is in about 12 hours, and there's more than enough room for him and... He trailed off, wanting Obi-Wan to say her name, and he did. Satine. He would wave Anakin off, telling him that this attachment with Padme is forbidden. He should call off the wedding immediately, or they will be forced to confront this with the Council. Anakin just nodded and left the room. He hoped and expected to see Obi-Wan on Naboo tonight. And many hours later, Yoda and Mace Windu were in the Jedi Council, awaiting Obi-Wan Kenobi so they could discuss the full Geonosis report, including what Dooku told Obi-Wan while he was in captivity. But Obi-Wan would never show up for the meeting. Instead, a temple guard would report that Kenobi left the temple hours ago. Windu requested that they ask Anakin where he went, but Yoda reminded Windu that Anakin was escorting Senator Amidala back to Naboo, and Windu put a hand to his chin, looking out at the Coruscant sunset, admitting he is worried about those two, but they will be relied upon heavily in the coming war. And on Naboo, Anakin would be smiling ear to ear as Padme emerged in her perfect white dress, and as she approached, Getting to Anakin's side, Anakin would feel another presence. From the trees behind them, leading to the landing pad, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Satine Kryze would emerge together, and Anakin would see a real smile on Obi-Wan that he's never really seen before, something much more human. After Anakin left his Jedi Temple quarters, Obi-Wan had acted purely on instinct. He just did what his heart desired. He took off to Mandalore, and he found Satine exiting a war council, where she was declaring that Mandalore will be neutral. And when she saw Obi-Wan, years of history collided inside of them both. Obi-Wan laid out his entire heart, telling her how much she still means to him, and Satine would admit the same thing. Obi-Wan went all out, saying they should go to Naboo, get married, truly commit to each other. Satine thought that Obi-Wan was crazy, but he told her that everything was already set up. All they have to do is go there together, and after a long walk through Mandalore, where many old memories resurfaced, Satine would act on emotion and instinct, taking a leave for the night. And now, on Naboo, Padme was in pure shock. She knew Satine quite well. She obviously knew Obi-Wan, and she asked Anakin if he did this. Anakin would admit that he played a small role. They would all just embrace it, and as the Naboo officiant got underway, Anakin felt alive in a way he never really had before. He knows it's reckless, but standing there, looking at Padme in the soft Naboo light, he didn't feel reckless. He felt certain, thinking about the war that is coming, about the darkness he senses around everything, and this gave him something steady. He glanced at Obi-Wan and felt proud. He pushed his master to stop hiding from his own heart. For once, Anakin didn't feel alone in his emotions. Padme felt both joy and weight. She loved Anakin deeply, but she also believes the Republic is worth fighting for, and much of her focus will go into that as Anakin is sent to the front lines. Obi-Wan knew that marriage would not be simple. It may complicate everything, but he also is tired of denying it. In that moment on Geonosis, when he saw his death coming, it was Satine that he thought about over everyone else. Satine saw the moment as an act of courage. The future was uncertain, but the four of them would get married and share a wonderful Naboo dinner, marking their final Naboo night of calm before the war. And then the war would truly get underway. Thousands of clones were deployed, hundreds of Jedi generals were leading them, Anakin with the 501st, Obi-Wan the 212th, and the two of them were naturals in battle. Anakin was much more bold, but he pushed Obi-Wan into sometimes being the bold one. But for the most part, he was steady, calculating, and reliant on negotiation, while Anakin loved to negotiate with the lightsaber. But something was shifting between them as well. The secret they now shared would bind them together in a way the Order never truly could. While the two of them had an attachment before the dual marriage, it was kept much quieter. But now they could speak more openly. They had nothing to hide. And late at night, aboard their cruisers, after the clones have gone to rest, and while they were repairing their own wounds from battle, the two of them could sit across from each other and actually talk. Not as master and apprentice, but as brothers or friends. Obi-Wan didn't hide his thoughts, and neither did Anakin. And after a few weeks, Anakin would finally tell Obi-Wan about his mother. Not just that she died, but how she died. The rage he felt, the village that he destroyed, the men, women, children. And the thought of it made Anakin's hands shake. He was deeply ashamed of his actions. Obi-Wan would tell Anakin that the pain didn't make him weak, but letting the pain and the anger fuel him does. But the feelings are natural, even for a Jedi, and he will learn to deal with them. For the first time, Anakin felt understood, like Obi-Wan was truly hearing him. And Obi-Wan wasn't telling Anakin that acting on these emotions with such power was natural, where Palpatine would say that his need for revenge was a good thing. Obi-Wan was filling the space that Palpatine once occupied for Anakin, and Palpatine would notice the change, and as the months went by, Anakin was no longer coming to his office after battles. Their private conversations were shorter. Anakin began to see Palpatine simply as another politician. The Chancellor would still try to create frustration about the Jedi Council, but Anakin was bringing all of his frustrations directly to Obi-Wan instead. Together they were questioning the war, the meaning of it all, and because of Obi-Wan's marriage, he would not only see the Republic propaganda and the struggles of Republic worlds, he would see the thousands of neutral systems that Satine was helping to lead. The planets refusing to take sides, as both sides were fueled by the same corporate donors, the same banks, and the war began to seem pointless overall, but still they would fight. The clones relied upon them, and they also knew that the Sith were at the heart of the Separatists. Once the Sith are gone, there can be peace. And in the battlefield, they were still the most efficient duo that the Republic had to offer. Meanwhile, Outside of the fighting on the front lines, Padme and Satine found themselves communicating much more often, and because of their shared secrets, they would become much better friends, finding they have a lot more in common than they originally expected. Satine would begin to understand the weight that Padme carried as a senator of a world in the heart of the Republic, especially the world that is home to the Chancellor. The Republic was beyond flawed, but still worth reforming, at least in Padme's mind, and Padme would begin to see why Satine chose neutrality. The governing on Mandalore was so focused on the people of Mandalore and nothing else, and Padme realized she barely knows what the people of Naboo want anymore. She's been so focused on the galaxy as a whole. Together, they would attempt to blend their visions of what the galaxy should look like, and they would create a delegation together that sought an end to the war. The two of them would hold conferences, broadcasted to any citizen who cared to watch. They weren't just speaking to politicians, they spoke to the people. Citizens of Republic, Separatist, and neutral worlds would call on their senators to work with Padme and Satine, and senators that were worried about losing their seats would listen to their people and join the delegation. Padme would soon return home for many weeks, speaking to thousands of people from Naboo, trying to find out what they wanted. She would realize that so much funding was being taken from the people and redirected into the war effort, more than she even knew. And in a huge moment for the Galactic War, Padme would give the people a vote on what she should do. The results were clear. Naboo would declare neutrality. The Chancellor's own homeworld, turning away from his conflict, would cause a huge ripple in the Senate. It was a statement that this war is not serving its people. Palpatine and Dooku largely ignored the growing resistance from the senators and the citizens. To them, these resistors were insignificant, but they were only growing, and soon Palpatine had to push for more emergency measures, separating more and more from the Senate. And through all of the fighting, the debates, and the nights in battle that seemed like they would never end, the four of them clung to their marriage. Anakin and Padme tried to share meals late at night on Coruscant a few times a month, whenever Anakin returned. For Obi Wan and Satine, they could only meet around once per month, but they knew they were committed to each other. They spoke about the future, about what peace could look like after the war, but they both knew that Satine's neutral stance makes her a target the longer the war drags out. She knows some of her own people resent neutrality in peaceful ways, and over time, the galaxy is growing more unstable, and soon, Sidious and Dooku knew that something had to be done about the neutral systems, led by Padme and Satine, that were disrupting the war effort. So Dooku would contact leaders of the Death Watch, and he would offer support, resources, and his personal help if they act. His request was simple. During the major peace conference coming up, where Padme and Satine will be giving their largest speech yet, the Death Watch will strike. They will capture both of them, and they will side with the Separatists. Both worlds will be thrown back into war, and their talks of peace will die out. But the night before the speech, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi Wan were finishing a mission on Felucia, and as their ship flew through hyperspace, nearly the entire Republic ship was sleeping after 3 days of constant fighting. But as they slept, Anakin and Obi Wan would both go into a similar dream or nightmare. They would see Padme and Satine standing in front of a huge crowd on Naboo, speaking to the people about neutrality in this war, where politicians were lining their pockets. But the nightmares would twist into chaos. Both Naboo and Mandalore security would fall. Explosions would kill so many, and when the smoke cleared, Padme and Satine were gone. Both Jedi would wake up at the same time, realizing it couldn't be a coincidence. They both had visions. They both didn't realize that their attachment was being used against them by the dark side. They would speak to the council about this, and Windu would decide that they will not be sent to the Naboo conference as additional security. If this was a Republic conference, then they could go. But Naboo has left the Republic, and the Jedi serve the Republic. Anakin and Obi Wan were ordered to stay on Coruscant until their next deployment. The Council will send a warning to Naboo for additional security. That is all that can be done. But, naturally, this decision would only push the two Jedi further from the Council, and they would leave Coruscant together, taking off for Naboo. Yoda would watch them go from the window of his quarters, and he would call Ahsoka up here, admitting he's worried about both Jedi. Something has changed them, and Ahsoka would admit she doesn't know the full truth. But Satine and Padme are in their lives. Yoda closed his eyes, looking to the Force for answers, but per usual in this time of darkness, there wasn't much to be found. The conference on Naboo was larger than anyone had expected, filled with senators from neutral systems, from the Republic, even a few Separatist delegates. Citizens would gather along the edges, drawn by the promise of something different for this war. Padme and Satine spoke about ending the escalation, giving worlds the right to choose their own path. And hidden among the crowd, Anakin and Obi Wan were standing apart from each other, waiting. For a while, nothing would happen, but then a transport ship on the far landing platform erupted in a huge explosion. Obi Wan ran off to the area, Anakin held back, and he would see Mandalorians fighting Naboo security. Anakin's impatience nearly pushed him to go help, but then he saw a Naboo cruiser sweeping low, and the hatch opened as Mandalorians' drop troopers launched themselves toward the stage. The Death Watch landed, started stunning nearby guards before grabbing Padme and Satine. Anakin ignited his saber. Padme and Satine were grabbed, lifted into the air, but Anakin cut one Mandalorian down, grabbing his jetpack, blasting off into the air after Padme and Satine. And in just moments, the fear he had learned to quiet was rising in him, the darkness trying to claw its way back. And with Padme in danger, Anakin would let it in. He flew the jetpack up to the Mandalorian ship, hidden above the clouds. And Obi-Wan was on the landing platform, cutting through Death Watch warriors, letting something guide him that he was unfamiliar with. Something he felt when he fought Darth Maul after Qui-Gon died. A power residing deep inside of him. Kenobi got into a ship, then flew up to the Death Watch transport, blowing a hole into the hangar shields and landing just before it took off. He would find Anakin battling against a group of warriors. Anakin tore through the warriors, and he would move into the ship with Obi-Wan. Both of them knew this could be a trap, but the duo had a certain policy when it came to traps. But today was different in how they were feeling in the Force. Mandalorians were thrown away with ease, both of them using the dark side, and soon they would reach the prison hall together. Padme and Satine were behind a ray shield, and between the Jedi and the shield was Count Dooku. He and Palpatine have decided that these two Jedi are too dangerous to leave alive. Their loyalty to the neutral cause is far too risky. Dooku would move first, but Anakin and Obi-Wan didn't fight like they did on Geonosis. There's no patience in Obi-Wan anymore. Anakin followed close behind him, but his recklessness was focused. Their blades struck harder than usual, and when Dooku tried to separate them with a blast of lightning, both Jedi absorbed it together, pushing forward through their anger. Anakin ripped a control panel from the wall, slamming it into Dooku, knocking him to the floor, and Obi-Wan cut through the ray shield panel, freeing Padme and Satine. The two of them had put a plan together, and with many of the Death Watch dead, they could sneak down into the weapons storage bay, grabbing what they need, while the Jedi were still battling Dooku. Satine knew the layout of the ship, and they would plant explosives directly against the hyperdrive core, triggering a detonation. The blast would rip through the entire drive, and the cruiser would lurch violently, tearing out of hyperspace. And when all of that was happening, Dooku continued his fight with the Jedi, but it was already over. He knew his fate. These two, working together in the darkness, would be unstoppable, and Anakin would surge forward as Obi-Wan stepped into Dooku's strike, driving through Dooku, stabbing him against the wall. Anakin and Obi-Wan would begin to realize what they are becoming, but the ship was shaking violently, so they ran, and the four of them would regroup quickly, getting to the hangar as Anakin would seize a small shuttle, taking off as the cruiser began to truly erupt. It all happened so fast, and as they were in hyperspace, Anakin and Obi-Wan took a moment to be honest with each other as they calmed down. Satine and Padme were safe, but their attachments to them nearly pushed them down a terrible path. The Jedi Code was there for a reason, and so both Anakin and Obi-Wan would come to the same decision. It was time they pull out of the war and of the Jedi Order and focus on what they truly want in the light, and with Padme and Satine. When they told the Jedi, the Council would be shaken, but they accepted it, and Ahsoka's training would be finished under Plo Koon. And without Dooku, the Separatist Alliance would begin to splinter, with Grievous at the core. And when Grievous made a final stand above Seleucami, the last organized Separatist resistance would collapse with him. When Palpatine refused to end the war, or give up emergency powers, Yoda, Windu, Plo Koon, Agen Kolar, Sazitin, and Depa Billaba would move together to confront him. In the final duel, Tin and Kolar would fall instantly, but the rest of the Jedi would bring down Darth Sidious together, and with Palpatine dead, Padme and Satine would step forward, proposing reforms that allowed systems within the Republic to focus more on local needs. In time, the galaxy would stabilize, the Jedi Order reformed under humbler leadership, less tied to politics. Anakin and Obi-Wan lived outside of the Order, aiding Padme and Satine in their peaceful ways, watching from a distance as Yoda stepped down and Plo Koon became Grand Master. And a few years later, the galaxy saw true peace and hope for the future. On Naboo, Anakin and Padme were raising Luke and Leia near the water, where they were married. Anakin was much calmer now, living the life he always dreamt of, and Padme was balancing political service with her family time. On Mandalore, Obi Wan and Satine would raise their son Jin, and the two families visited each other quite often, as Jin, Luke, and Leia were a trio of best friends, growing up, preparing to lead a new era. And folks, that's our story for today. Yesterday. This might actually go up on Monday. We will see. It's kind of late. Anyways, late Valentine's? Remember, right as I started editing, Jesus, holy, stumble, chill out, calm down. As I started editing the Darth Maul story before this, the one that wasn't universally loved by all of you, my apologies. You know, it's a little darker. Anakin doesn't, I don't want to spoil it, but, yeah. Anyways, I gotta go. My girlfriend's calling me. Happy Valentine, happy late Valentine's Day. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.